where we uncover the strategies that drive exceptional go-to-market execution. I'm your host, Randall Tolerton, co-founder and sales leader at LeadGenesys. Today, we have a special guest who has mastered the art of building successful sales organizations in the cybersecurity space. Please join me in welcoming Robbie Robbins, who's the vice president of Netrise. Robbie's track record speaks volumes to his experience and expertise in scaling early-stage companies. He's led several sales teams at PGP before its acquisition by Symantec, Bradeon before its acquisition by Archer, and Secure Alert prior to its Radware execution. And then one of his more recent was Refirm Labs before it was bought and rolled into the portfolio of Microsoft. Robbie, thank you for joining us today. It's a pretty impressive string of companies that you've worked for and help drive value and growth and execution to exits, some pretty cool exits.
Yeah, thank you, Randall. I'm super excited to be here. And as you start to describe that, I really feel old. It kind of brings back memories of some of the heartaches and the good times for each of those points along the way.
Yeah, I would say mature with an incredible amount of expertise and wisdom that you can bring to the table that I'm sure you do to all your organizations that you've worked for and in the future as well. Things off, why don't you tell us a little bit about what attracted you to sort of enterprise software, the cybersecurity space, and Netrise, if you want to get into that a little bit. Let's start at the beginning.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to, Randall. We've got a history together. You and I worked together many moons ago before the .com era. Back in the 98 timeframe when we were working for Macro Media at the time before Adobe bought it. But how I got into kind of cyber was shortly after that timeframe, 2001. I kind of went back to my software or cybersecurity roots and started working as the first feet on the ground for PGP, a data encryption secure email solution back in the day. You know, there's a number of other stops along the way, but what I found in my 30 plus years of kind of enterprise software and cybersecurity sales is really to find a repeatable process and a go-to-market strategy. And when we were doing it back with Mapper Media, it felt like almost every sales engagement was a unique snowflake, and that was really hard to scale. But luckily, I've been able to be part of organizations that helped really put in place some processes that made it a little bit more repeatable, and the results kind of helped us get to the point where there was a liquidity event and then exit for a number of the ones that I was part of.
Yeah, with all of that experience that you've had to coming in at the early stage, you're typically like the first salesperson on board, right? Usually that executive that comes on board and kind of tries to tie everything together to integrate and essentially land those initial deals to really secure the organization's future. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's when you're the first boots on the ground, there's no kind of one hat you're wearing. So I found that oftentimes there was many roles I played, from picking up the phone and making that first call, introduction to an organization, typically what a business development rep or a BDR would perform, to actually doing the sales presentations, the demonstrations. A lot of times proof of value or proof of concept was myself and the founder or somebody from the engineering team. So there was a lot of dual hat and multi-hat responsibilities that it allowed me the opportunity to grow my skill set, but as also was incredibly frustrating at times of not always having the answer and having to punt until a future discussion. But that, what you described, was often what the task was, go finding the lighthouse customers.
What do you think the biggest challenge of that is when you talk about an early stage company and they've gotten product market fit and they're just ready to turn on the sales engine from a professional standpoint? The founder's been selling. He wants to bring in that Robbie Robbins to help him frame things out. What do you think the biggest challenges walking in day one are?
Yeah, so I got kind of some personal experience to speak from here. Oftentimes when you come in as the first sales leader from a founder-led sales organization, there's a lot of a kind of ownership that the founders of the engineering teams have of the customer relationship, the talk track, how they position the company and technology. And I found it is oftentimes challenging if the founder or the leadership team are from an engineering focus, right? So they want to talk technical, they want to get to the bits and bytes of why their technology is the best. That was In the couple of the organizations I worked in, it was really challenging to kind of reset the expectations and start to frame the conversation of solving business problems and focus on business
Mhm.
outcomes instead of feature function technical discussions. So why it matters discussion and why the prospect should care now instead of, hey, we've got this new feature coming out on the roadmap I want to tell you
Right.
about. So that was a bit of a learning, and each company I worked for had different dynamics of founders, but I found a through line that oftentimes the engineering focused founders are very focused on the roadmap and how to make the next great feature that meets a specific problem. Oftentimes that was not really scalable, right? So you would fix or create a solution for one
Mhm.
customer. Where's the next 2 or next 3 or next 6 customers, right? So you never really had a repeatable model. And that was oftentimes one of the bigger challenges to overcome.
Right. Did you separating that technical win from that business win, and you're driving the business side of it? I suspect though having that technical resource is pretty powerful, but then having that conversation where we need to talk about the business impact or the outcome impacts that come from like an enterprise solution, even like Netrise and so forth that can deliver.
It's a great point because what I found at Netrise, I'm relatively new. I knew a number of the principals of the organization from my past couple of lives. Kind of since 2018, I personally, Robbie Robbins, have been focused on this supply chain security problem with the Refirm Labs, Binarily, and now
Mhm.
Netrise. But what I found is very powerful about the Netrise story is the principals and the founders do have that kind of business outcome focus. It's made it an easier transition for me to help articulate the why it matters and why companies should care now into the
So
market.
you probably also bring in a little bit of like a Rolodex or a network really that helps to solidify some of those initial land deals. How do you how do you get started in terms of besides picking up the phone, besides doing that heavy lifting, how do you communicate or enable the organization to start investing in solutions like CRM systems, things like that, if they don't have them in place, or actual systemic go-to-market processes that orient toward lead generation and pipeline and the development, so it's repeatable.
Yeah, that's a big part, right? The tools and automation of like, how do you do a lot of the kind of sales motions, if you're a team of 1 or a team of 2, maybe
Mhm.
3, really finding a customer relationship management platform. I've used HubSpot in the last kind of 4 startups I've been with, and it's extremely powerful. People have different opinions on it, but I really like the ability to get a holistic view of the, like you said, the pipeline. What the new opportunities, leads, what new contacts do we have coming in? Automating a lot of the outreach campaigns for email campaigns, for example, and then get kind of a nice crystallized view of your deal flow of where it might go through the certain deal
Mhm.
stages. That's really helped me in the last couple of startups, as I mentioned, really get a view on the predictability of what, how healthy the pipeline is, how healthy the forecast is, what's the predictability that we can take to the board and communicate the state of our business. Without automation tools, back in the .com days, we were doing this in a Microsoft Excel
Yeah.
spreadsheet. Things have changed significantly, right? The idea of social selling is a new concept that's really taken ground and allowed me personally to scale without hiring a lot of individual salespeople, of being able to use the power of telling a story or using social media to really communicate companies' value propositions to target
Yeah,
audiences.
with machine learning and AI and the Gen AI platforms that we have available to us, there are these sort of the bleeding edge companies out there that are talking more about lean management or lead sales organizations or lean marketing organizations. You've had to face that and it's not new to you. It's not new to anyone that's been in the enterprise space that's doing early stage startups. So how's that communication going though with management to then, if you're not going to invest in like a lot of SDRs right away or middle level salespeople, that then it's technology. Are you seeing like a gap there where they don't necessarily want to mechanize yet? Or are you seeing a big embrace of bringing in really truly being more and more lean?
I would say the latter, quite honestly, is we see a lot. I mean, from the last 2 or 3 companies I've worked for, it's really how do I do more with less? The way I would bring proposal or the business plan to the leadership team was around automating a lot of the work. The last year, really, it's been hyper focus on this AI concepts that have really taken off, I would say, in the last 12 to 18 months. Netrise is embracing a lot of that. I'm still quite candidly not 100% sold on having an AI bot take over sales development work. Our ASP is high enough that is kind of white glove service or high level kind of sales motions. We're at Netrise focused on the enterprise, a large public sector agencies. So having that personal relationship and communication with the human, understanding people's pain and how our technology uniquely solves those problems is something that I haven't really been able to replicate with AI tooling. Not to say that it won't happen soon or at some point in the future, but at this point, I'm still a little on the fence personally.
Is like Netrise an organization that leans into outsourcing some of the marketing automation efforts, or are they very open to exploring sort of the AI SDR capabilities, whether it's inbound, outbound, or for support? There's a lot of different use cases, obviously, for AI workflow systems and so forth.
Yeah, I will just maybe kind of give you a little bit of context of my role at Netrise. So Rick Beatty is our Chief Revenue Officer. Gary Schwartz is our new Chief Marketing Officer. And I've been brought on board to help build our business development and our strategic partners. So focused on how do I grow a channel organization. Rick and Gary are very forward thinking. I won't say that we are going 100% AI, but I would say that we're using AI to augment a number of our sales plays. That's what about the broader AI strategy for Netrise.
We've seen a lot of companies trying to figure out how well this all works together. LeadGenesys, we're working with HubSpot and Apollo and Clay and a variety of organizations to leverage like contacts within LinkedIn and so forth. I know you mentioned the other day to me prior to our podcast here that you were meeting with Gary, and so you were sitting down with your CMO there. If you're willing to share, what's the gist of that? Was that to try to get buy-in between the two organizations and to align yourselves for a broad integration and a broader strategy for the organization?
Yeah, I would say Gary and I talk every day. So it's a great collaboration that we have at Netrise. Gary and I talk often about how to maximize our partner-first strategy. At Netrise, we're looking to build, as I mentioned, a channel ecosystem, a traditional value-added resellers, distributors, managed service providers. That's the thread that Gary and I were talking about after we spoke, was around that VAR, distributor, MSSP sales motion and sales plays, and how we create compelling content that we can use on our various mediums to really draw people into the conversation of software supply chain security. And that's really the market space we're focused on. We also have a technology ecosystem partnership focus, other technologies that help extend our value proposition. And then the third leg of the stool is around system integrators, folks that are adding value on top of their service offerings to large government contracts or commercial and enterprises.
I mean, that's an incredible amount of complexity to be able to harness and pull together, because building an ecosphere takes a good amount of time, like a platform or what we see come out of like the ServiceNows of the world, Salesforce and so forth. You guys are at that genesis within your space and so forth. So you got partnerships, you got marketing, you've got sales, you've got direct, indirect, the partners, and then customer success in those areas. How comfortable is the executive team with saying, yeah, that is our strategy, that is what we're going to invest in? And how is that message being received?
I mean, we're very much aligned and united at Netrise on the kind of strategy that you just mentioned, right? Of the whole kind of the beginning to end of the relationship with the customers and prospects. It's being communicated quite clearly. Rick Beatty's doing a great job, our CRO, of really crystallizing the team's focus on a few key pillars. You mentioned direct, indirect, the broader messaging and marketing, and kind of the lifetime customer value of customer success. We're continually to having all hands meetings. The communication has been excellent as far as unifying company towards a shared vision.
Because a lot of what I hear out there is a challenge of trying, part of the challenge oftentimes is just getting management and the executive team to buy in and go, this is what we want to do. Secondly, it's if they do buy into it, they're like, okay, great. We'd like to see a return on investment in a month and a half. And we all know how long it takes not just to integrate. And let's just say we were silos. That takes a long time, 6 months, 9 months, just from a sales cycle perspective on the enterprise. But now we're talking about integrating. We're talking about pulling in AI machine learning. We're talking about now timelines to see success. How do you work with management where they're saying, yeah, we want 2 months, we want to see something happen. And you're like, you realize partnerships, marketing campaigns, a sales pipeline process takes way more than 2 months, 3 months, particularly in the enterprise. How are you benchmarking and showing progress that they're comfortable with, where oftentimes it's a challenge to meet those expectations on both sides?
Yeah, great question, Randall. So I think line is nothing's changed since you and I worked together many moons ago, right? We're all on 90-day contracts. So we've got May 20th, we got the end of June to make something happen. Every morning we all wake up, look at our OKRs and figure out what we need to do to move the ball forward. Yeah. So I would say at Netrise, it's no different, right? We're a partner first organization. So I've got a group of key performance indicators, KPIs I'm driving towards, and that's how I'm showing progress. Those KPIs are negotiable, right? I think the really bottom line of your question, right? How flexible is leadership into working together on creating realistic expectations? I found that open and honest dialogue is the best way to do that. I'm not going to hit 100% of them, but I'm also going to not miss 100% of them. It's just a matter of what I found is all comes down to where we spend our time as sales pros, because there's an opportunity cost to everything. The time I spend talking with Randall and your team and your broader audience, right? There's other things that could be more important or more beneficial from an ROI point of view. So I found that as I'm kind of planning out my week and how do I retire KPIs, keeping in mind that opportunity cost is really something I can do personally in addition to negotiate a reasonable KPIs.
Yeah, and when I've been on the partner side, and kind of like you, same thing, where they would ask us, like, are you a sales guy? Are you the partner guy? Early stage for both. And it's challenging because management they want the results right away. And so when I'm looking at, and then you also want to put repeatable processes in place, right? And you want to be able to be predictable down the road, but you need those anchor deals, right? You need that like low hanging fruit deal to get across the board. Whether it's coming direct or indirect, you're managing both numbers and so forth. But would you say that anchor deal is what you're looking for typically right away? Because that must be the most critical thing when you're in the early stage type of a company.
And I think you're spot on. So it's the kind of lighthouse customers that you can prove that you solve a problem or the business outcome is something that can be repeated across multiple different customers. So oftentimes it's that first lighthouse customer in an industry vertical that I personally am looking for, somebody that can help validate that we're solving a problem, not just for them, but for the next 3 or 5 customers that look similar to them.
Yeah, makes sense. Let me ask you, so let's maybe shift course a little bit. Do you want to talk a little bit about Netrise and plug it a little bit in terms of what Netrise is doing and how it's differentiating itself in the marketplace? So we can chat about that a little bit specifically, if you're...
I don't want to go through a full commercial. I'll give the Reader's Digest of what Netrise is all about. We're in the software supply chain security marketplace, right? So what does that mean? We're helping equipment makers, people that are creating products, either software or hardware. They want to be able to understand what potential vulnerabilities are inside that equipment. We're also helping enterprises or buyers of that equipment. So both sides of the supply chain. The device or equipment makers and the enterprises or government agencies that are fielding that equipment. So a Netrise, basically, at its simplest level, we deconstruct compiled code or firmware or operating systems, containers, a number of different file sources. We deconstruct that, identify all the components in the software, subcomponents and dependencies so that you can get a transparent view into what is actually inside the equipment, either before you ship it or before you buy it. The use cases around this are, think of, just got to read the newspaper, Log4j. People don't read newspapers anymore. So it's that Log4j, SolarWinds, you name your APT. There's a lot of kind of threats going on in the supply chain. So Netrise really gives you visibility to understand which of those might be the most impactful for your organization. The use cases that come to mind are around this concept of a software bill of materials, of understanding what's actually inside your product, open source components, dependencies, backdoors, problems that you might want to know about before you field it. The markets we help are around anything critical infrastructure, public sector, defense industry base, financial services, healthcare and medical devices, power and energy. So there's a number of these critical infrastructure categories that Netrise really provides visibility into the problems in the supply chain, so that chief security officer or supply chain risk manager can be proactive in what they buy or what they field instead of reactive. Every CISO or chief security officer was when Log4j joined. Where is this in our enterprise? How big of an impact is this to our earnings that I need to report to the board? So a lot of the urgency has been really driven up by kind of the state of our threat actors, and we're giving enterprises and device makers visibility.
What's over the years, over the decade, what is the problem changed dramatically with AI and open source AI and compute capabilities, or are we compliance risks, those things, or are we fighting the same battle and maybe seeing things move quicker, faster, or whatever? What's your perspective on that?
I think things have changed dramatically since 1999. You and I were working together in 2001 when I got into cybersecurity, right? You were still PGP signing your emails, right? There was really no concept of malware, right? We had antivirus and signatures, but this new age of having backdoors implanted into a Huawei modem, for example, or the Chinese cranes that are in our ports that potentially have vulnerabilities or exploitable weaknesses, right? It's a whole new battle space. It's really quite interesting, right? That's what keeps me passionate about, is how to help organizations get ahead of the threats, because in this AI world, it's only going to get more complex, and the adversaries are going to be harder to track and to defeat.
Yeah, makes sense. Is there anything that you'd like to personally share, or anything that, with regard to the growth of the organization and so forth, that it's changing at this particular juncture?
We're going gangbusters. We had about a 600% growth last year over year. We're about 50 people now, and we're continuing to grow both on the engineering side and the go-to-market side. I would encourage you just to maybe find me on LinkedIn. I'm Robbie Robbins. Super easy. I post a lot of stuff around our kind of content and our messaging, but also look at our website, netrise.io. We're posting all of our job postings, and I'm happy to have a dialogue with any of your audience about our partner program and how Netrise might be a fit for organizations that are looking to lean into the software supply chain security problems. We differentiate ourselves. I didn't really give you this commercial earlier, but we look at post-production code. So there's a lot of solutions on the marketplace that look at source code and they create a software bill of materials. That's very important to get a developer's assessment of what's inside. What Netrise does is we look at post-production after the software's been compiled, the binary's been created. We look at the firmware or the software as an attacker would. No access to source code. We simply decompile it and find the problems inside of it. So that would be one differentiator, I would say, is your audience starts to think about whether or not Netrise makes sense for them. Oh, I already use Black Duck or already use something else to do software bill of materials. We augment those solutions.
Where are people going to see you guys in the next couple of months at particular events and so forth? I know you just got back from RSA, I think it was, or...
Yeah, we've been really spreading the message around binary composition analysis. That's a term for this post-production analysis. We're going to be at DEF CON and Black Hat this year in August. We've got a number of things happening in the late Q3 to Q4 as far as out in the market. But I would say Black Hat and DEF CON are the next place you'll see us.
Great.
In August.
Well, Robbie, I really appreciate all your time today. Thank you very much for sharing that. I think, just to summarize some of the things you talked about, the importance of really having that open communication and that handshake agreement with strategy with your CMO, with the executive team, integrating the different silos and parts of the organization for a coherent and a cohesive strategy to execute against is absolutely critical. Partnerships, you guys are already embracing partnerships. You're embracing go-to-market engineering, all the things that are really challenging for any company that wants to be successful. It's usually that's usually the break point where organizations aren't doing that. So it sounds Netrise and yourself and the whole organization's on a pretty good trajectory. I'd just like to thank you for the time you spent and looking forward to catching up with you again shortly. And the best of luck to you and Netrise.
Thank you very much, Randall.
Thanks a lot, everybody. This is Randall Tolerton, LeadGenesys Sales Leadership Podcast. Signing off. Thank you very much. Have a great day.